Millions in lost rent. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Working through a new stein of coffee, and I thought we'd have a look at this domain article that's discussing just the millions in rent that's being lost on a monthly basis. Now earlier today we looked at another article where it was just exploring the impacts of the pandemic on the property market, and we saw that the wealthy property suburbs haven't been impacted as much, but a lot of the investor and unit grade stock have. Now we'll have to see if we have continuing declines in rent ongoing, how that's going to affect that part of the sector as well. And let's jump over to the Property Council data room and let's just have a look at some figures, because this is focusing really on units and apartments, but we'll look at the median residential unit value, and the weighted average is 569,000 in Australia, with Sydney at 700 and poor old Darwin at 300 down there. Now if we look at the rents, we can see the weighted average is at 455 a week. 455 a week. And after costs, you could get a decent mortgage on that. Sydney is at 525. Adelaide is down at 330, and good old Brisbane, where I live, is at 395. Seems about right. Got Canberra at 480 with all the politicians. How's Melbourne doing at 430? Hobart's more expensive than Brisbane. It just shows you. And that's going to take a hit with all of the decline in international students, the decline in holiday tourism, which is going to flood the market with more Airbnbs. So let's go through this and have a look at it. Sydney and Melbourne, so just Sydney and Melbourne, lost 60 million a month due to the international student drought. So we can see why everything seems to be pushed to get these students back here. Our property market really is dependent on a lot of these international sectors. We had the foreign investment really overheating the market in 14, 15, 16, 17. The black line on this chart shows the percentage of building approvals for foreign investors. That flows through to just the challenges for citizens of the civilization or the nation trying to break into the market. That's why property prices in some ways have grown so high, and housing affordability is to the point now where you need to have both people in a family working. And that has other impacts. That reduces the time you can spend with your children. It reduces the incentive to have children. People aren't having as many. It increases your stress. That flows through to health and quality of life. So I think we'll see a lot of people, due to this forced house arrest, will step back and go, you know what, why have I been running on this treadmill, chasing, keeping up with the Jonas, and just going, you know what, stuff it. I'm gonna go green change or sea change, cash out, save money. It's happening in the States. Will it happen here? So landlords in Sydney and Melbourne are counting the cost of the international student exodus, losing an estimated 60 million in rental income each month. Chinese property portal Jiawei, I probably butcher that every time, estimates each city has shed just over $30 million worth of rent a month since thousands of international students rushed home during the onset of the pandemic. Figures released last week by Victoria University Mitchell Institute revealed there were 30,000 fewer international students in Melbourne in 2020 compared to last year, and 29,000 fewer in Sydney. So just look at that number of people coming here, spending money, working, learning, and it's a wonder why so many businesses, even universities, are investing in this property sector. And what's going to happen to all that property? What's going to happen to all those investors that have gone into it when their mortgage holidays disappear and they can't get any students in? Are we going to start seeing them flood the market? I mean, is anyone out there, let me know, is anyone out there spruiking for now's the perfect time to jump into student accommodation? Because I'd be interested to see how they justify it. So, the executive chairman, Georg Schimmel, I butchered that, we'll call him GC, said the company's estimates showed that nationwide around 750 million of property-related income would be stripped from the Australian rental market in 2020 due to the absence of international students. Nearly $1 billion, everyone. Nearly $1 billion. Well, not quite, but 30% off. These are back-of-the-envelope calculations for the purpose of illustrating the challenges that landlords face in the short term, he said. He said the worst hit had been Sydney, where landlords were estimated to be losing $7.5 million a week in rental income. On an annual basis, these losses would total nearly $390 million, he said. It's a staggering amount of money that shows how important foreign students are to the property market in Australia. But it also shows how dependent our property bubble is on these students. On these students, guys. And think about it, with the US dollar getting lower, with the Australian dollar higher in comparison, are they going to come to Australia? Or will they go to the US? Will they get more bang for their buck? Will they be able to go to a more prestigious university? I was always told by the lecturers that Australia is the poor man's US. If they can afford to learn English somewhere, they'll learn it over in the US. Let me know in the comments, everyone. What do you think? The drop in revenue has seen some student accommodation providers dramatically reduce rent to attract local tenants. Oh, well, there you go. There you go. So it's already changing. It's already changing. I remember when I was looking at one years back as a student, thinking, oh, you could buy one for $100,000, it'd pay for itself. You won't make much money, but at least you're not paying rent. I'm so happy I never did, because when I looked at all the body corporate costs, it's crazy, because they're pretty luxurious, actually, compared to living in a dodgy old share house that most of us are used to in student days. Furnished Property Group provides rentals to international students. General Manager Rochelle Manson said rents have been dropped from between $300 and $400 a week to just $150 in the inner city and suburbs, including Darlinghurst, Glebe, and Redfern. What do you think about that? From $350, $400 down to $150 a week. That's more than 50% cut. That's a huge cut in your revenue. We just had to pivot the business to regain some of the money, she said. SQM research figures showed Sydney's vacancy rate skyrocketed during the pandemic crisis, with the latest data revealing 29,416 properties were sitting vacant in May. The figure included student accommodation. The Sydney rental market is the worst it has been in 25 years, and when they stopped Chinese students from coming in, it left a big gap, Ms. Manson said. Even our domestic student market is down because people who usually travel from interstate are studying at home. Ms. Manson said, when students were asked to travel home by Prime Minister Scott Morrison in April, Furnished Property Group were dealing with more calls about breaking lease than actual bookings. Well, in Melbourne, apartments are also sitting empty as landlords now consider dropping rents to attract tenants. And here we have it, guys. We're just seeing the beginnings of this. The recession is just beginning. Technically, we haven't had 2 quarters of negative growth. I know there's some sectors that have been in recession for some time, but as an overall nation, we haven't had those 2 quarters. So back in the day, they would have, if they had have hoped that the next quarter would have been better, they wouldn't have admitted that we had a recession or that the economy is recessing. Bell Property Carlton director Scott McElroy said the local rental market was being smashed, not just by lack of international students, but also by a lack of tourism and no major events being held in the city. And yet people are saying property will still go up. Property will still go up. Everyone, what about all the investors that are on mortgage holiday, that are on JobKeeper or JobSeeker, that are on mortgage holiday and hoping it'll all get better in September? Why are people jumping in now? Why are people jumping into property? Can someone tell me why? Can someone explain to me why they're jumping in? Do they think it's all going to turn around? Or is it just because we're only seeing the articles where it's the FOMO, the property sold above reserve, super rich property, well above the median, where people are jumping in because they probably have the money and, the luxury end may be buffeted a bit compared to all of the lower stock like we're seeing. You're only dealing with a particular segment of the market, so it's difficult to rent to anyone else, he said. The problem couldn't be easily turned around this year, he said, as students will continue offshore. I don't see that changing before Christmas. So how many landlords have been smart enough to sit on 6 months' rent in cash? Maybe a lot of them are paid up ahead. Or what's probably more likely is you have them doing the magic negative gearing trick of just paying interest only and just buying one and another and having a whole property portfolio worth millions, and they've just been using it to reduce their taxation. And now it's going to hit the fan where they can't afford to bankroll it. And they're dependent on the good graces of the bank. That's a terrifying situation to be in. While the news is currently grim for landlords, Jawai, am I pronouncing that right? IQ Eyes, Mr. C, said Australia's appeal for international students would continue to be strong, and he was hopeful of a bounce back next year. What if the US dollar is even cheaper? Wouldn't that be more appealing? But then again, we've handled the pandemic much better, and we don't have nutcases running around smashing up stuff. So I guess that is working to our favour, at least for now. The good news is that by early next year, we can hope that most of the missing students will have returned, and Australia's appeal to international students will be higher than ever, he said. What do you think, everyone? What do you think? How do you think this will affect the rest of the market? Will these significant rent hits here flow through to other businesses? I'm reminded of the mining boom. You know, the mining boom we had years ago, particularly up in Moranbah and all these mining towns, where real estate agents were telling people to get in, buy, for just temporary workers, for just people who were there just to rent out while construction was going, while there was a big boom. They were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, like $500,000 plus, $700,000 for a crappy little house in literally the middle of nowhere. And now those same houses are worth $200,000. Remember that, and rents have plummeted. Some of the smart people rented out their house and lived in a tent in the backyard. You know, good on them. Seems familiar. It seems familiar to this. We'll have to see. Maybe some of these investments will take a big hit. And, you know, this example here, that's not too bad. You know, that's a typical, you know, when I think student accommodation, I think all the extra services, the body corporate, and the overheads. You'd hate to be sitting on one of those, making no money with a huge mortgage. As always, please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay, or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.